C.E.S.A Higher Education in Focus webinar series. Colleagues, let me first use this opportunity to wish us well on the occasion of the Africa Day, which was held yesterday. It is rather apt to remind us of the vision of the African Union, which is that of a peaceful, integrated, prosperous Africa, driven by its own citizen, representing a dynamic force in the global arena. Africa's desire for shared prosperity and well-being, for unity and integration, for a continent of free citizens and expanded horizons, where the full potential of all are realized, putting into consideration freedom from fear and, of course, want. This could only be achieved by ensuring that education plays its role as key agent for sustainable development. And at the AUC, we are sparing no effort in putting this message across. Education and training are at the heart of the Agenda 2063. It is beyond doubt that education and skills revolution that is called for by the Agenda 2063 cannot materialize except with a focus on strengthening personal as well as leadership development and work readiness in African institutions of higher learning. And I'm particularly excited that that is the theme of this meeting or this webinar today. Colleagues, a number of the CESA, the Continental Education Strategy for Africa strategic objectives are geared towards the theme of today's discussion. And to achieve these objectives, good quality information about what graduates do after obtaining their qualification or leaving education and training is essential. In order to both understand the cause of graduate employability problems in particular regions, economic sectors, or for graduates from particular higher education or vocational education disciplines, to identify solutions for those employability problems. The value of such information is already been highlighted, and in most of our frameworks, particularly with regards to the African standards and guidelines for quality assurance. I know we would learn a lot from our speakers here today, and I don't want to waste much of our time. I also look forward to hearing the discussion on the subject matter, and I would like to urge us to contribute meaningfully to the discourse. But before I yield the floor, let me use this opportunity to thank once again our partners, the AAU, EU, and colleagues at Obre Global for this wonderful initiative, as well as, of course, the members of the C.E.S.A Higher Education Cluster. I thank you so much, Apio. Over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. We really appreciate the support we receive from the African Union Commission and for all the good work you've done with the coming up with the Continental Education Strategy. And now, before I go on forward, I'll give the floor to one of our most important organizations, the Association of African University, to give a short opening remarks on this. So I'll give the floor to Jonathan, please.
Thank you very much, Apio, and good morning to everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you are coming from. We at AAU are happy to be associated with this important activity within the Hacker Initiative. So, as mentioned by the previous speakers, the C.E.S.A Higher Education in Focus series is geared towards harnessing information that we feed into data policy nexus and how we can use data to inform policy in our discourse on African higher education. So AAU is happy to partner with all of you and also to work closely with the C.E.S.A higher education subclusters in achieving this important objective. It's important, ladies and gentlemen, that the theme for this particular webinar is on strengthening personal leadership, development, and work readiness of graduates in African universities. This, in my view, represents one of the important contributions towards addressing the challenges of graduate employability and graduate unemployment in Africa, which we are grappling with. So I feel that this webinar will help to throw more light on this challenge and the best ways to addressing this important cankerworm on our higher education space. This webinar is also unique in the sense that it concerns the key stakeholders in Africa, and that is the students. And so we are happy to have eminent personalities that will help us make sense of this important topic. Thank you very much for coming, and we wish everybody fruitful deliberation. Thank you. Over to you, Apio.
Thank you so much, Professor Mba. And I'll just also echo that students are very critical in higher education because actually they're the reason why we are employed. So it's very critical to always ensure that student affairs is taken into account and the student voice is heard. So today we are going to listen to the experts, practitioners under student affairs, and we will try to get that data policy nexus. Africa has to be driven by data to make policy, and I think that is how we can be very sustainable. Now, as we go on to the webinar, to the meeting today, we will enable everyone to be able to speak when you have some question to ask. Or if you feel comfortable, you can also just put something on the chat. We will always be checking on the chat to make sure that all that you've directed to us is listened to. Now, we will go on to the meeting. I would like to introduce our facilitator today, Dr. Matete Madiba. And Dr. Matete Madiba is in charge of the Student Affairs subcluster of the Continental Strategy Higher Education Cluster. Now, Dr. Matiba is a PhD holder, and she has many accolades. She is currently the appointed director, Student Affairs at the University of Pretoria, South Africa. And prior to this appointment, she was a deputy director in the Department of Education Innovation at the University of Pretoria. Previously, she served as the acting director, curriculum and development support at Tshwane University of Technology. And before that, before she joined Pretoria. Prior to that, she was also serving as a lecturer of mathematics, science, and technology at the Mathematics, Science, and Technology College of Education. She's been awarded several scholarships, which is also one of the things that we try to drive to get as many African students to have opportunities that may not be available. She's participated in a different project under the Africa-EU Partnership Agreement. And one of them was Tuning Africa project, where she was a specialist for a subject specialist. She also served as the management team of Tuning Africa project. She has served as sub-cluster coordinator from 2016 for the Continental Strategy for 2016 to 2025. And she is currently serving as a University of Pretoria Institutional Task Team for Curriculum Transformation. She is the chair of that committee, and she is a member of the National Executive Committee, serving as a Research Development Officer. So it's a mouthful, but she is an accomplished practitioner and for student affairs, and we'd like to give the floor to her to introduce our expert team and to be able to guide this meeting. So take the floor, Professor Madiba.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to talk to you, and thank you for joining. We do have a panel of speakers that I will introduce shortly. And as the introductions have gone, I shouldn't miss an opportunity to say, yes, Happy Africa Day, if not Happy Africa Month. We are talking about exploiting the other learning sides of educating our students, because I believe, and I argue elsewhere, that the quality of graduatedness, like all the other student success indicators, is as much a matter of the classroom as it is of organized student life outside the classroom. So we are going to be listening to the panelists argue and propose, and they will be proposing ways of doing exactly this, to make sure that what we do with our students, our graduates outside, or our graduates to be, what we do with them in the classroom is well complemented by what we do with them outside the classroom. And we take that so seriously. We collect data and we inform our policies in terms of how to make sure that there is quality in the offerings that we offer. I am going to be introducing our first panelist. I am very conscious that our time is ticking and ticking very quickly. Our first speaker is Professor Vish Saka. He is an associate professor at WITS, or University of the Witwatersrand, in Johannesburg, in Pretoria. And he is an associate professor of international relations and principal investigator for emancipatory futures studies in the Anthropocene at the University of Wits, South Africa. He also edits the Democratic Marxism series and has published on Africa's political economy, democratic politics in South Africa, and on the empire, transnational alternatives, and global emancipatory ecology. Prof is a veteran activist and democratic eco-socialist. More recently, he founded the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign and Climate Justice Charter. For me, his work is a case study of how we have to take our graduates along in paying attention to SDGs, but also to the Agenda 2063. So let's listen to him. Over to you, Prof. Vish.
Thank you, Matete, and it's an honor to be on the CESA platform and together with all your other partners. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Well, I'll make a few remarks about the knowledge project and the imperatives facing us in the text around the climate crisis and the climate challenge, and what this means for young people, graduates, etc. So I framed my input around preparing graduates for a world in climate crisis. Now, the knowledge essentially really has to take on board big problem called climate change and climate crisis. And here we have complex systems. We have to be thinking on a planetary scale and the interconnections in this problem that we are trying to solve. So what happens in different parts of the world, whether it's in the Amazon or with the extraction of fossil fuels in the United States, or if that's happening on our own continent, all of these things are interconnected. The revenge of nature is very real. We're seeing it with the COVID-19 pandemic, and that is also impacting on our knowledge project. And for us to think in inter and transdisciplinary ways, earth science is becoming more and more important for the world we are going into. New ecological approaches to the humanities and social sciences are also very, very important. In other words, the generation that's coming through our university is increasingly having to grapple with a problem that is about nature. We have to valorize indigenous and local knowledge and bring that into the university as part of decolonizing the knowledge project. We need a different kind of pedagogical praxis, an emancipatory praxis, where our universities must be leaders in society and even within their life world around solving these problems, particularly systemic change that we need right now, to decarbonize our universities, to demonstrate what systemic alternatives are, as well as to show what capabilities are required for the world we are going into. And this relates to climate justice. Now, behind me is a photograph of a mural painted by students at my university. And I very deliberately have it as my crown because it says climate justice is social justice. And that's the crux of what climate justice politics is all about. Now, we know that there are many, many tipping points. These are the canaries in the mine, the alarm bells, if you like, about where we are with global heating. As the Amazon gets destroyed, for example, that takes us into a very, very dangerous world. And we are all keeping our eyes on these tipping points as we're trying to advance climate justice. What's very striking is that the world has been through important cycles of resistance. And in this most recent cycle of resistance, third cycle, a whole new generation of young people growing up on our planet have made their mark around the climate problem. And they want this problem to be taken seriously. COVID-19 has also opened up a whole new space for further resistance and for change, which young people want. The pandemic has been a moment for deep reflection. And so alternatives have come to the fore around transforming our society so we can handle interconnected problems, ecological disasters, resource peaks, food crises, etc., that are really complicating our societies. And young people are alive to these challenges. But COVID-19 has forced a reckoning with who we are as a species, but also the continued reproduction of carbon capitalism as a threat to all of us. And there is a new urgency in discourse. There's a new zeitgeist, and this is being amplified by movements led by young people on our planet. We see debates about vaccine apartheid versus vaccine commoning, and those that stand for vaccine apartheid and hoarding vaccines are losing. Because more and more humanity is saying this is a common global problem and we need to solve it together. And there's a greater tide for a waiver of intellectual property in the WTO, technical know-how, and so on. And this is the zeitgeist I'm talking about, a common global problem that we need to solve as a common humanity. There's also a global transition going on, and it's very, very important for us to take note of this. The Biden administration is breaking new ground around the seriousness with the climate problem. Europe has more ambitious decarbonization targets than both the US and China. The International Energy Agency just reported that all oil and gas and coal must be kept in the ground. This is unprecedented. There's talk about a rapporteur on human rights and climate now within the global architecture for human rights. The COP summit this year, the chairperson of the summit is talking about phasing out coal. First time in the history of multilateral COP negotiations, you have the talk of phasing out of fossil fuel. This wasn't there. You have Green New Deals, net zero targets, etc. And all of this is related to the challenge of climate justice. Now here, I'm just going to flag 4 very important challenges for us in African context, which are coming out of struggles waged by young people. The first is climate justice for Africa. And as I said, Africa has been hit hard by vaccine apartheid and is being hit hard by climate injustice. Global per capita emissions on our world is 4.8 tons. Of course, the US is way higher than this. But sub-Saharan Africa's emissions are at 0.8 tons. South Africa, 8.16, and South Africa is a carbon criminal state. So as we struggle for climate justice, and this is what many young people are saying in these struggles, we need a climate justice shift in South Africa and amongst African states that are locked into carbon extraction and exporting fossil fuels. We also need to address the climate debt that the global north owes Africa. And here we are not talking about false solutions. The young people of our time, they want genuine systemic transformative alternatives. And we need financing for Africa's deep just transition plans. And in that context, we must also keep in mind that as shocks register, over 200 million Africans will be displaced by worsening climate change. So South Africa, this is just to show you the carbon criminal state. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, except to say that it's very coal heavy and it's moving a bit more towards gas, and it's locked into this trajectory up until 2030, which is unacceptable, particularly to young people in our society and engaged in climate justice struggles. South Africa is out of step with where the world is moving right now. Africa, in terms of carbon, this is what the footprint looks like in terms of extraction. 10 countries at the vanguard of oil and gas investments, etc. This is not the future for our continent, and young people are making this point very, very strongly. These extractivist societies really have to go. If you look at the climate risk index for Africa more generally, already climate shocks are registering in terms of floods, in terms of droughts, in terms of cyclonic activity, and this is having major implications for our continent. Southern Africa as a region is heating at twice the global average. So when we overshoot 1.5 degrees Celsius this decade, Southern Africa will be at 3 degrees. At 3 degrees, most livestock cannot survive. Our crops, our cash crops will be stressed, etc. And we are basically entering a period in which there will be extreme weather shocks. Basically, the climate forecast for Southern Africa is a drier region and probably not livable many of them. So very important socio-ecological systems are going to be stressed and are imperiled by further heating, food systems, water systems, etc. And we've seen that during the worst drought in the history of South Africa, which is not over yet. So the second very important challenge is, how do we think about a climate justice deal for Africa? There's a lot of talk about a Green New Deal, but climate justice is even more transformative as a perspective. We are saying ground this in radical Pan-Africanism, this problem, global solidarity. It's a common human problem. And what should an African climate justice deal be all about? Yes, we must end structural adjustment debt. We must end a green revolution that is not working, that is displacing most of our peasantries. We must ensure that the global north pays its ecological and climate debt to us. We must end carbon lock-ins, all the divestment in some of these fossil fuel economies in our continent. We must defend the commons and commoning and demilitarize Africa. Many countries in the context of war are militarizing relations for continent. We're seeing what's happening in Mozambique. We must bring forward emancipatory African thought, the addition of alternative thinking in our continent on self-reliance, on delinking, Ubuntu, and more. We need to start thinking about systemic adaptation systems as part of this African climate justice deal, disaster management capabilities, developing climate science, and more. We need to be, in our national context, be alive to the importance of climate justice. I mean, 3 million people were displaced by the cyclonic impacts in Mozambique alone. Now, what is the justice for those? They didn't cause the problem, but yet they face the greatest harm. Now, similarly, in South Africa, there's a very acute awareness that given our history of apartheid and the inequalities that are there in our society, those most vulnerable, workers, the poor, grassroots women, rural communities, they must not carry the price of climate injustice. And this charter comes out of a process of activism in South Africa, largely led by young people, students. As I said, the mural behind me was painted by students when we took the charter to Parliament. The charter is very, very clear, and it talks to a new imaginary of alternatives that young people want. They want climate jobs. They want zero waste. They want food sovereignty. They want a commitment to defending biodiversity, and so on and so on. Public transport, clean energy, public transport, equal housing. These are the answers coming from young people, that generation that's now seized with the climate problem. There are various tools around this. I'm not going to waste time. 238 organizations in South Africa that support this. Again, many of them are children and youth organizations championing this initiative. I'm finally going to end with this issue, which is around transforming our food systems. And our food systems have to change because they're implicated in the global climate problem. And here the idea of food sovereignty is very, very important. We need to re-agrarianize the world through food sovereignty, agroecology, and commoning. And here in the African context, it is very, very important for us. As I said, the Green Revolution is not the answer. Not everything that Bill Gates and capital brings to Africa is good for us. We must ask critical questions about all of this. And right now, food sovereignty is very important because not only can it mitigate emissions, it can also draw down historical emissions. If we transform our food system, we can tackle the problem head on. It's a solution. And if you look at where we are now in terms of global politics, I'm not going to spend time on this, but global agriculture contributes about 40% of emissions. We have 60 years of soils left future for us. And so I just want to conclude with this, which is what we are doing at our university, building food sovereignty at our university, building a food commons. This is our food sovereignty. It's mainly for our hungry students, but we are flipping this problem on its head. We are building a food commons where we are now actually, I'm missing a meeting right now, where our university is agreeing with us that they must roll out more gardens across the university. We build a food commons, fruit tree forest. Whoever's hungry can have an apple. Whoever's hungry can pluck a whatever, a vegetable, etc. And so the university is committed to rolling out 100 new trees with us. We have a communal kitchen. We have a farmers market inviting local small-scale farmers in and around Joburg, etc. We have chefs coming to help our students understand how healthy food can be prepared, etc. But the bottom line is that the university is demonstrating that it is a climate justice leader. In the midst of COVID-19, what we were doing in WITS and other parts of the country has also taken off. There are many, many examples of this kind of hub building, ending hunger, and so on, coming to the fore. And basically, the university is demonstrating both in its inner world, but also more broadly in society, that we can have another approach to hunger. We can have another approach to decarbonization. We can have another approach to being zero waste and so on. With that, I'm going to end, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Prof. Vish. You have shared with us the vision that we should be carrying into the future. And it is a challenge, especially for student affairs practitioners. The argument is we cannot confine this knowledge and the skills that should go with it just to in the formal classroom. We have to make sure that as practitioners, we stretch, if you like, the canvas outside the classroom into all the other sides of learning. And as we do that, we should be able to get organized and organize this as proper curriculum, core curriculum that goes along with the formal curriculum, but we must be able to do many other things. And that's why today we are talking about where do we need to collect data and what type of policies do we need to put in place to make sure that these type of knowledge is what we make sure that our students graduate with out of our universities, that by the time they go into the workplace, they go with the right mindsets. And our lives depend on this, but not just our lives, the lives of the generations to come. And that's why we really need to build this into our curriculum. And I want to emphasize it, not just the formal curriculum, but also the curriculum outside the classroom that is associated with organized student life. And here is the content that we should be engaging with. Thank you so much, Prof. Vish. We are going to move on. Prof. Vish, if you can stop sharing so that we have our next presenter who will be able to share. And I just want to remind the participants that what we are doing is to work through 5 questions. And these are the 5 questions that we are working through. How far are student affairs practitioners in African universities using other sides of learning, that is besides the formal classroom, to develop African graduates and to prepare them for critical and engaged citizenship? And I think Prof. Vish has demonstrated how in their university they are doing this. And the argument is it should be also the vision of student affairs practitioners to make sure that gets written and included in the curriculum that we offer outside the classroom. The second question that we're working through is how to take advantage of the latest technological advances to design, implement, and recognize learning and development outside the classroom. So we will be addressing that. We are also exploring selected case studies, and the VETS one is one of those case studies. We also want to concentrate on what data needs to be collected for a better understanding of the state of leadership and personal development of students in African universities, and the data should be able to inform all the policies that we put in place at a continental level. So I would now like to invite our second panel presenter, and I just want to stop sharing. Our second presenter is Dr. Michael Boacha Yedom, and he is, I just want to get to his bio. He is the Director General and the Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for Educational Planning and Administration, a UNESCO Category 2 Center of Excellence at the University of the Cape Coast. He earned his PhD in Higher Education and Student Affairs. He received his Master's in Educational Administration, and he also participated or served as Dean of Students at the Huwayees College in Madisonville, Tennessee, USA. Dr. Michael, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madiba, for the introduction. I'm trying to share my slides, and I believe you can see the slides now.
Yes, we can see the slide.
All right, and is it legible enough?
Yes.
All right, great. So thank you very much for this opportunity. It's exciting. It's very exciting for us to be here this morning, this afternoon, depending on your location. To look at issues relating to the theme for the webinar, personal leadership development and work readiness of graduate students. For the next 15 minutes, I'll be leading the discussion, providing some data, recommending some data that we can use for evaluation and improvement, so we are able to develop graduates who are ready for the global world. So my presentation basically will look at brief introduction, and then we will look at work readiness of graduates in African universities, some data perspectives, and then student affairs curriculum, and then we will end there. So let me ask some of these reflection questions. How does university life prepare students for life after school? Our students go through the curriculum from first year to final year, they graduate. How does the university life prepare them for life after graduation? And then how should university life prepare students for life after school? So the big thing for us is the difference between how it is done and how it should be done. And there seems to be a gap. And it is for this gap that we are making this call for student affairs practitioners to fill the gap and use co-curricular activities, programs, and initiatives to make it complete. And then in this discussion, context matters. What works in Ghana may not necessarily work in Nigeria or South Africa or Senegal. What works in the United States or Europe may not necessarily work in Africa. So context is important in this discussion. So let's look at work readiness of our graduates. What does the world require? What does Africa require of our university graduates? The world, Africa, require our university graduates to demonstrate character, to demonstrate integrity, to demonstrate honesty wherever they are. And this must be done while they are in school. We must prepare them to be able to demonstrate this character that we expect from them before they graduate. How do students change in the university, and how do the changes take place? How do they move from one level to the other? How do they develop self-confidence? How do they develop interpersonal relationships? How do they develop integrity? And how do these changes happen? Most of the time, they don't happen in the classroom. Most of the time, they don't happen within the main formal curriculum. And that is where we come in as student affairs practitioners, student affairs scholars, and student affairs administrators. We must provide that additional alternative to complement the formal curriculum, so we can prepare our students for what we expect them to demonstrate. So we can prepare them for what employers are looking for. So what data are we looking here? There are a lot of data within our universities, within our institutions. So we must effectively and efficiently document and utilize existing data. We have data on student performance. We have some data on students' involvement in clubs and other societies on campus. We have religious ones, we have other social ones. How are students involved in these activities? How are we documenting the activities and the projects that they are involved with? Project Deep was an initiative of a group of researchers in the United States. They came together and decided to, that was in 2002, decided to document and describe what strong performing institutions do to achieve their noble level of effectiveness. And they selected a case studies of about 20 high performing institutions just to discover and document and describe what they do to achieve their very high performance. And it came up with a lot of indicators as to what we can do. And I'm just making reference to this document that exists. The study took about 3 years. It was published first in 2004 and also in 2005. And many researchers in student engagement studies and student involvement studies have referred to this document. But again, let us not forget that this was within the context of the United States. So some surveys and some data that we can begin to think about and reflect on as student affairs practitioners. One is student satisfaction survey. In fact, last year, a team, myself and 2 other colleagues, researchers at the University of Cape Coast, we won some little grant from the University of Cape Coast Directorate of Research, Innovation and Consultancy to conduct some pilot study on student satisfaction. So we did the work, it's been completed, it's been accepted for publication, and I believe that very soon the published work will come out. But basically we looked at 3 key areas. We looked at student satisfaction of residential services, we looked at student satisfaction of academic services, and we looked at student satisfaction of issues of security and safety. And the findings were revealing. The point I'm making here is that student satisfaction collects in-depth data of student satisfaction with their educational institutions. So if we want to improve what we do for our students, we need to begin to document the extent to which they are satisfied or not with what we are providing, so that it could be a basis for improvement. Of course, you do this with a data collection instrument, and then as I indicated earlier, you get a lot of feedback for improvement. And then studies have shown that students who are more satisfied usually are more successful, they perform better, they graduate on time, and they go out as graduates ready for Africa and also ready for the world. So one area that we must begin to think about is campus-wide student satisfaction survey, and I'll highly recommend that the student affairs cluster of C.E.S.A begin to look at some of these surveys that we can conduct to get some data to help us improve what we do. The second one is student engagement survey. Now, what does student engagement survey do? It looks at the extent to which university students, usually undergraduate students, actively participate in various aspects of their higher education experience. So how are they involved? What are they doing? Which projects are they involved in? Who is facilitating these projects? Who is providing the platform for students to get engaged in these areas? And let me give a very basic example. We have about 168 hours within a week. Now let's assume that our students are taking about 25 hours of credit every week. They spend 25 hours in the classroom learning and going through facilitation of various academic programs. And then studies have shown that our best students use almost the same number of hours as they spend in the classroom for private studies. So if they are spending 25 hours in the classroom, we are assuming they are spending additional 25 hours outside the classroom on various assignments and all that. That makes it 50 out of the 50 hours out of the 168 hours they have in a week. Let's assume they spend 10 hours a week sleeping and resting. At 10 hours a day, sleeping and resting. So within the week, that is another 60 hours. If you add that to 70, if you add that to the 50, you are around 120. Give them another 10 hours for other activities, you'll be around 130. We still have about 38 hours or probably more left for students to be able to use for other activities. How do students use these extra hours that they have? That is where we come in as student affairs practitioners. We need to regulate and support students to use the remaining hours that they have within their week on productive activities and engagements. And that is why it is important for us to begin to look at some of these surveys to have data with respect to what they are doing. And it will help us to identify aspects of campus experiences, both the curricular and co-curricular, that can be improved through changes in policies and practices. Some of these things cannot happen. We cannot achieve anything if we do not tackle it from the policy level. And then this leads us to the big conversation of student affairs curriculum. If we want to be recognized as student affairs practitioners, and we really want to show that we exist and we are visible and we have some initiatives to complement the formal co-curricular activity, then we must begin to come together and find a way to formalize what we do with our students. So then the language, the term student affairs curriculum comes into play. I will begin with only 3 functional areas of student affairs. So residential education, career services, and then campus engagement, campus community engagement initiatives. As we plan for programs for students within the residence hall, let us begin with a plan. What thematic areas are we looking at? What are the objectives of the program that we want to roll out? What are the specific learning outcomes? What are the evaluation processes? And then do we allocate time for students to reflect, go through reflection after we have completed the program? And if we're able to document this, present it at the various academic boards for approval, then it becomes a formal document, a formal plan that will guide what student affairs practitioners do. So we don't have situations where we just do things very relevant and yet they are not properly documented. And our academic departments see it as, we used to call them extra curricular. Now we are insisting they are co-curricular because they are not extra. They add and complement to what happens in the classroom. So we need to begin to have African Student Affairs curriculum. And as I said, I will recommend that we begin with 3 key areas, develop the document, and I know the Student Affairs cluster of C.E.S.A will take this initiative. So we have a document to share, and various African countries can make it theirs, specific to their countries. Even though we may have broad objectives and broad learning outcomes, we can still tailor them down to make them country specifics depending on the needs of specific countries. So this, I believe, must happen. And as we do this, we'll be able to get some feedback, data-driven feedback to help improve what we do in student affairs. So some reflections. What campus features, and this could be policies, this could be programs, this could be practices, enhance student experiences. Are there policies on our campuses that we believe enhance student performance? What are the programs that enhance student performance? And what are the practices? Let's think about them, let's document them. What do strong performing universities do to promote student success? If you believe your university is one of the best on the continent, how are you doing it? We want to hear your story so that some of them can be replicated contextually in other African countries. And what are the higher education administration approaches at these highly effective institutions? So what is your approach? One approach, if we want to strongly go with the student affairs curriculum, will be to push for and model student affairs, academic affairs collaboration model, where there is strong relationship between student affairs and academic affairs, where information within the academic affairs space is shared with the student affairs space, and vice versa, so that when a student is demonstrating some unusual behavior in the residence hall, his academic staff, academic advisor, some professors of his or hers may be able to have access to this information, so we can begin to tackle and support such students from both the academic space and also from the student affairs space. So academic and student affairs collaboration model may be one way for us to begin to think about, one model for us to begin to think about more seriously. So at this point, I think I'll be bringing my discussions to an end. But for me, the take home are 3 key areas. How are we doing it, and how should we do it? There seems to be a gap, and student affairs professionals must be ready to fill that gap with formalized student affairs curriculum, where we have very specific areas relating to objectives of what we do, learning outcomes of what we do, so we can evaluate our programs, initiatives, and activities based on the learning outcomes. In that case, when students are changing based on our programs and our curriculum, we'll be able to document that, we'll be able to observe that, and we'll be able to do it well. The second one is for student affairs practitioners to strengthen their research capacity so that we can lead this process of some research agenda. We must have a research agenda as student affairs practitioners. And even though we will be working collaboratively with faculty, with academic colleagues, we must strengthen our capacity in research. We must be able to easily conduct relevant data, collect relevant data, analyze them professionally, systematically, and be able to draw some conclusions from the analysis for what we do. And then
Thank you, Dr. Michael.
Finally, we can do it. And I believe that the time is now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You have spoken to the data that needs to be collected, but also the curriculum that needs to be documented when it's planned, when it has outcomes, and when it has when evaluation has taken place. And I think these are the commitments that we need to make in institutions, but we need to think about how do we also do it at a continental level? What data do we need to collect to make sure that student affairs practitioners are doing their part in equipping our students for the Africa we want? If they are really maximizing their opportunities of using this other sides of learning to prepare our graduates for the world outside the formal classroom and outside the university. I would now like to invite the next presenter, and he is Mr. Kwesi Akwasem. He is by profession a counseling psychologist and a student affairs practitioner in African universities. He works with the Directorate of Research and Academic Planning of the Association of African Universities, AAU, as the head of student affairs and programs officer, with keen interest in designing, implementing, and managing capacity development in programs in teaching, learning, research, faculty, students, and community development in African higher education. Over to you, Mr. Kwesi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madiba. And let me also congratulate our earlier speakers. We've received very remarkable messages today. And my task is very simple, just to look at some of the policy implications of all that we have discussed in relation to strengthen personal leadership development and work readiness of our graduates on our continent. So just move quicker. All right. So I'm just going to tell us a short story and then we'll move on. And I'm just comparing the student of yesterday and the student of today. And it's very much important that we need to understand the characteristics or background of these students. So I just titled My Father and I. So my father went to university when he was approaching midlife and almost like 40 years. And this is not peculiar to him. At the time, he had most of his colleagues entering universities at the same time. At the time, he was gainfully employed. He was married with 2 kids and still enjoyed the support of the extended family. He had good social support system, I might say, and a sense of community. And all other things being equal, he was emotionally, physically, mentally, economically, culturally, socially, and if you want, psychologically ready for university life. Because after school, he had worked and gained experience. And he had also already formed an identity for himself and had a sense of direction as an undergraduate student then. And the average student in school at that time, he tells us, was around 35 and had very few colleagues who were just under the age of 30. And as we go on, I just want to reflect, those of us on the call, do we resonate with my father's experience as a student some years ago? Now, a few decades after, and this is me, I entered the university right after high school. Perhaps I celebrated my 18th birthday on campus. Interestingly, I had also friends and colleagues who celebrated their 16th and 17th birthdays on campus. And interestingly, today, we have students celebrating 13th and 14th birthdays on campuses. Sometimes we hear such stories and we are fascinated, but it is happening in our universities. And so most of my colleagues, just like myself and others, were just beginning to live an independent life. No mom around, no dad around, no rising bell to wake us up early in the morning to coordinate how we should do everything just as it used to happen in high school. These are the students in our universities currently. So unlike my father, I was in the process of discovering my self-identity, discovering who I was. By then, we're trying to figure out life emotionally, physically, mentally, and what have you. And most of us were just dependent on our families financially. But most important, Boachiadum 2021 put the characteristics of the students in our universities very good. And when you go to our schools now, the age range of university students now is within 18-23. And these are students who are easily compromised and are less experienced in life and need constant guidance and monitoring. And the word that I want all of us to take note of is constant guidance and monitoring. They are working computers or digital natives. So everything they do is on social media. They are taking selfies in class, whatever food. Yeah, the social media platform, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, everything is there. And one key thing you'll find about them is that they are resourceful and have more access to information. Again, due to diversity and modeling of different cultures, some of these students are exposed to some antisocial behaviors. So we have these students struggling with issues of violence, occultism, substance abuse, sexual harassment, and also education we can't run away from universities today. Now, massification of higher education has also led to a high representation of students with varying needs. So on our campuses today, we have students from foster homes, students who are differently able. We have students from first generation families. It is the first time anyone from either the mother's side or the father's side is entering the university. So they have peculiar needs. We have international students. We have students who are parents, students who support themselves financially, and those who feel marginalized. They don't feel belong in institutions. How do we plan both the formal and non-formal curriculum to ensure that we address all these issues while the students on campus, to ensure that they become responsible citizens? And that is our responsibility as student affairs practitioners. But most critically, you will agree with me, and if you disagree, you can just put in a chat board for us to know that students are spending more time in educational institutions these days than with their families. And so the parental responsibility of grooming children and raising responsible adults now lies in the corridors of our school system, especially at the university level. If you have 13s, 12, 14s entering into the university, then we should understand that we have a huge responsibility as university managers. So then there must be a paradigm shift in student affairs administration my father enjoyed years ago, and what I even enjoyed, and what the current generation may be enjoying. So we've had Dr. Madiba, we've had Dr. Boachiadom telling us about the classification of student life on campus. And we need to understand that when you pick a student life on campus, you can just break it into two. We have what happens in the classroom and what happens outside the classroom. So what happens in the classroom is being facilitated by the lecturers. I'm going for a lecture, I'm doing a presentation. And what happens outside the classroom, which must be also well coordinated, are being facilitated by student affairs practitioners. So do you see that happening in your university? Do you see that happening in your institution? And most of the time, the quality of these two paradigms determine the success rate and the quality of the graduate we churn out. So it's also something that we need to take into account, into consideration. How do we strengthen personal leadership development and work readiness of our graduates? And these are some of the policy implications that we want to drum and ensure that as a continent, we begin to reflect on these things as practitioners. So the call, because we are student affairs practitioners, we want to look at ourselves first, and the call must be on us as practitioners. And what we are saying is that every full functioning university in Africa and beyond has either an office of the Dean of Student Affairs or the Division of Student Affairs. And the division supports the educational mission of the university and enable it's not only about the cognitive domain, it's not only about what happens in the classroom, but what happens outside the classroom is very, very important. And the Student Affairs Division does that through programmatic support and others. And so the division is very important in every university across the continent. But the division in some institutions are well coordinated. Some even have sub-units. You have the careers and guidance centers. We have the counseling center. We have the dining residential, the health, and others. And they work collectively to promote the optimum development of students. But unfortunately, when you come into African universities, per the work we've done so far, you find out that sometimes we operate in a very disjointed manner. So we have the counseling center having its own mandate, the health centers having its own mandate. We have the office of the dean of students who just looks at issues of residential facilities, issues of student elections and what have you. So we miss that kind of fluidity in the way they work to make sure that they support students efficiently on campus. And this has been a major setback for us as student affairs practitioners. So what do we need to do? And that takes us to some policy implications that we need to look at as practitioners. The first I call level one is intentionality and understanding. And Dr. Boakye Yadom clearly mentioned that we need African universities to understand that student affairs practitioners or the division of student affairs plays a critical role in the university setup. So we need to be very much intentional about student affairs practice. It is not just one of the things or one of the departments in the university, but if we understand that what happens outside the classroom carries weight as well, be purposeful and strategic about student affairs in educational planning. So when you go to the Western universities, it is the core of educational planning, and you can never do without. So what do we do? The second level I also propose that we look at is the restructuring of student affairs in higher education. So every university across the continent must have a fully functioning division of student affairs. And this must be a requirement for university accreditation. When universities are for accreditation, it is very much important that we look at what happens in the student affairs division, because it contributes immensely to the overall development of the student. And there must also be a clear pathway, and there must be outcomes of what happens well stated in a university statute. And one thing we also need to do is to move away from the office of the Dean of Students to the Division or Directorate of Student Affairs with qualified personnel. So the current situation across most of our universities on the continent, you will find that we only have the Office of the Student Affairs, and that is the Dean together with some 2 or 3 staff who are kind of supervising or managing the affairs of students on campus. And we have the counseling center being managed by someone department, and they do not enjoy that synergy. And so we need to really move from working in isolation and make sure that we bring everything to a proper arm, just as we find in most of the advanced institutions. Critically, we also have to ensure, and just as our earlier speakers have really mentioned, we need to have a structured curriculum and support services. This has been said, and the only thing I want to add here is that in terms of the structured curriculum, we need to ensure that it begins from year 1 throughout the student life on campus. What happens in our universities is that students are being admitted, they go to orientation, and after orientation, 2-3 weeks, they're on their own. They try to figure out how life must be for them on campus, and all that they concentrate on is how to go for lectures, write quizzes, write exams, pass, and that ends it. But we must be intentional and design curriculum that will ensure that the students stay on campus from first to final year. It's something that is going to add up to the student development. And that is very crucial to us as well. So we must deliver need-based student support services that promote the health, the physical, emotional, social, financial, academic, or psychological well-being of our student. And one innovative thing that currently those of us in Ghana have seen has to do with one of our universities who they decided to really create long vacation jobs for students who are unable to pay their school fees. So when every student is gone home, if you have challenges with with the payment of your fees, the university has designed some internship or vacation job for you. You stay on campus, you work, and then you're able to pay your fees for the next semester. And this is really innovative. That is what we are talking about as student affairs practitioners. So at the continental level, we need a harmonized out of classroom curriculum. And Dr. Bachiadom rightly mentioned the curriculum. We are talking about co-curriculum. We need to have a handbook that spells out how we should run our student affairs offices. What are some of the indicators we need to pay attention to as student affairs practitioners? Unlike the level 4, issues of professionalization. When you go into most of our universities on the continent, we have the vice chancellor or the appointment committee appointing the deans and the leaders or the heads of department, and student affairs is one of them. So most of the time, we do not pay much attention to some of the critical background knowledge, the academic qualifications that these student affairs practitioners or heads must have. It is important that if a dean of student affairs has a background and understands student characteristics, understand what goes on into coming up with innovative programming, he understands what goes on into supporting students on campus, you will find out that throughout his tenure, you see a lot of student development work going on, and you see a lot of change in that. But when we have it in the opposite way, that becomes a huge problem. So what we are proposing is that in our universities, we must try our best possible to pay attention to issues of background. Academic qualification is very important. Now on the continent and beyond, there are several academic programs in student affairs, and so we need to be intentional in our promotion and also our appointment process. Lastly, we need at the continental level some kind of harmonization and also some standards and guidelines for student affairs practice. And then also the need for a professional network that looks at issues of qualification frameworks, issues of certification. If you want to be a student affairs practitioner, what does it take for you to be a student affairs practitioner? We need a network, and that was what has been started by the AAU in partnership with the CESA, the Student Affairs Cluster, making sure that we are able to engage ourselves at the continental level. Dr. Bachiado mentioned research, and I don't want to add anything to that. It's very important. We need to build a capacity. We need to ensure that we are coming up with cross-cutting research that really builds on what we do as student affairs practitioners. In conclusion, I make it very simple that any university that is intentional, purposeful, and is strategic about student affairs or student development, any university that prioritizes in-class and out-of-class student engagement and has a structured curriculum or curriculum for both engagement, has well-resourced division of student affairs with qualified personnel, and an aligned one is qualified personnel, will obviously, you see the fruit, it will translate to quality graduates that university churns out annually. So if we want to look at how to develop our students beyond academic work, then we must pay attention to student affairs on the continent. So begin to look at your university setup. How is student affairs being run? How is your educational setup like? And if some of these things are missing, we are proposing that we need to go back and look at some of these things. A good conversation is the one that never ends. This is just a 15-minute presentation. We can't say it all, but I would say that it's never too late to start it right, and it begins from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kwesi, for your presentation and for emphasizing and taking it up from all the other two speakers, that time outside the classroom is valuable for our students and graduates' further development. It shouldn't just be seen as leisure time. Of course, they do need leisure time, but when it is organized, it becomes more meaningful. And that we definitely need to partner with our experts in the universities and our researchers for the kind of content that we need to pull out of the formal classroom and make sure that it further enhances the readiness of our students for life after university in building this Africa that we want. And I consider what Prof. Vish has shared with us such an excellent way of partnering with experts and researchers, and then bringing that outside the classroom into very practical projects that are run. But as you do that, and with student affairs practitioners, we really need to get more organized. We need to put to record whatever we do with students, and it shouldn't just end up with a recording. We should be able to evaluate, and our students should be able to walk out of our universities with proof that they have learned, and they have learned as we have prepared them. I see a hand from Prof. Mba. Yes, here's the opportunity. Prof. Mba.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madeba. I would like to, through you, to thank our excellent presenters. I think I'm a better student now. Professor Vish, Professor Michael, and Professor Sam, they have all educated me very well. I'm happy listening to their very interesting and insightful presentations. I just want one clarification from Professor Michael, and then one from my colleague, Mr. Kwesi. I was expecting Professor Michael to let us know some practical examples of the engagement, campus engagement that students, undergraduate students, should be subjected to, because he tried to do some number crunching relating to how many hours the students have left, apart from the one they use for their sleeping and studying. So I don't know whether he can give us some practical examples of what these undergraduate students should be engaged in on campus for the 3-4 years that they will be there, to occupy them and make them better people when they come out to serve the society where we live in. And then finally, for Mr. Kwesi, yeah, I listened to his excellent presentation, and it seems to me that the panacea to all students' problems is having Students Affairs Division that is effective and efficient on campus, that will address issues related to students. I'd like to find out whether that is true, that if we do what he's saying, whether we will arrive at the promised land, as it were. Because I take the example of Europe and North America. We copy them a lot for various reasons and try to adapt what we find from those countries to have various contexts. But they have all these things that we are saying, but can we say that the student life is optimal in those places? Can we say that their moral life, their emotional life is something that we in Africa should copy? I was thinking, in my personal opinion and my various experiences working with people all over the world, that Africa has an enviable tradition and culture that we must safeguard, whether we are young or old, which money cannot buy. And I was expecting us to try to see what we can do to continue to nurture and increase those traditional cultural values that are good for us, to help us to become better citizens of Africa and better people placed to serve society. So I don't know what your reaction is on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Mba. We are going to have a Q&A session, and I would like to go into the next part of the program, and we are going to invite Cairo Park to do a demonstration. And this is to lay the argument on the table that as we organize the curriculum outside the classroom, as we become intentional about it, we need to use the kind of resources that can help us. But for Prof. Mba's questions, please take note of them, the presenters, and we'll be able to deal with them and more. And I hope you also heard when Prof. Vish talked about decolonization and bringing in indigenous knowledge into our universities. And I guess this is what Prof. Mba is alluding to. But first, let's look at how we can make our lives easier by incorporating technology into helping us to plan and implement a curriculum to develop our students outside the classroom. We have a demo here, and it is based on a real course that we offer here at University of Pretoria, meant for girls. And this is about a way of contributing towards gender parity, to make sure that women are not always left out, because when you look at leadership positions, we still celebrate the first woman who gets into this position or the other, because the numbers are still very less. So we are, as part of making sure that our graduates become ready, we've partnered with an international movement that runs a course for women students to prepare them as leaders when they graduate. But the essence of the demo is to show how technology can help us do a sterling work in driving this type of curriculum. Cairo, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Madiba, and thank you to everyone for having us here with you today to present on this platform. It really is an honor. So I'm here today to present to you the Canvas LMS, and to specifically talk about how Canvas LMS can help support you in planning, delivering, and evaluating your student affairs co-curriculum. A little bit about Canvas. So Canvas LMS is a cloud-based LMS, and it's been voted one of the best LMSs globally and adopted by a number of different types of institutions, from schools, TVETs, and higher education institutions. So it's got quite a far reach globally. So I'm going to take you through, from the planning perspective, Canvas LMS and how it can help you ready your curriculum for delivery. So what we're looking at here is the course homepage. And what your course homepage does is it helps engage student curiosity in your curriculum. Now, there are many tools available in Canvas, and one of the great things about this LMS is it's very flexible. So it can support a variety of teaching and learning strategies. So this homepage acts as a dashboard for lecturers and students. So we are in teacher view at the moment. So what you're seeing are a lot of tools. I have my teacher to-do list. Here it tells me if there's grading that needs to be done. I also have this coming up area, which is a summary of my calendar, telling me if I have lecture sessions upcoming or any other events. We also have an embedded video here for our students. And video content is always great because it does help different types of learners engage with content. So that's our homepage. The next component I'm going to share with you is the modules area. Now, this is where you would organize your learning for students, and these modules can be laid out however you like. You can use a topics format, and you can also use a weekly format. So each of these modules can be opened and closed, just so that it makes the navigation a little bit easier. What you can see here is each of these modules has been locked. So students have to complete session 1 before they're able to move into session 2. So in terms of planning your curriculum, you can really structure how the students move through your content and also guide them through that as well. So those are the prerequisites. Another fantastic feature is the calendar tool. So if I open that over here. And here you can see it can just help me as a lecturer plan the different types of activities that are upcoming. It also lets me see if there are any assignments due. Here in these grayed out blocks, these are sessions that students can book with me as their teacher. These are one-on-one sessions that students can access from their calendar. So this is a fantastic tool to encourage student engagement with their lecturers, and also a student support tool as well. So quickly now moving on to how Canvas LMS can help you deliver your curriculum. So particularly for the student affairs co-curricular, we're going to focus on making content engaging and accommodating diverse student learning needs. So in that, I'm going to focus on different collaboration tools within Canvas and tools that help empower the student voice in the learning process and create dialogue between the lecturer and the student. So one of the first features that I'm going to show you is the discussions feature. And I'm going to show you 2 different types of discussions. So here you can set up any discussion you like. These are facilitated discussions that your lecturer or course lead would set up. In Canvas, there's a tool where you can design interactive videos. So here you can see I've included a video, and then at a particular point, the video will stop, and you can include a quiz in the video, or you can include a reflective comment or thought to inspire your students to think. And what's exciting about this is it removes video from being a very passive learning tool into something more active. And in this particular activity, we've asked students to watch the video and consider the questions and then write responses to those questions. So that's one type of discussion that your students can engage with. And the second type I'm going to show you is a group discussion. So here you can divide your students into groups, and you can decide how many students you want in each group. And the students can then go away and have discussions in each of the groups. And you as the lecturer can move between the groups freely to see what students are discussing and contribute to their discussions, and perhaps provide more guidance if you feel that's necessary. Another really fantastic collaboration tool is through our Canvas assignments. So I'm going to show you here a media submission. So there's multiple different submission types, which is particularly exciting for a co-curricular, because often students are not submitting theoretical submissions. They're often needing to perhaps go out into industry and record an interview perhaps that they've had, or other video submissions. So here, a student has submitted a video recording, and I'm able to view that. And as a lecturer, I can provide my students with comments here. I can upload an attachment. I can even record myself, giving the student feedback. So instead of doing written comments, I can record myself a video. I can record a voice note as well. And then another exciting tool is that you can do voice annotations. So if you're on the go and you just want to write something to your students without actually having to type, you can use this tool, and it adapts to whatever language you might be speaking. And then that populates in the comment box over there. So what's exciting about this is if you as a lecturer post a comment on a student submission, the student can reply to your comments and you can have a dialogue with the student, which is nice because it encourages the assessment to be part of the learning process instead of just a simple evaluation of. So the next feature I'm going to show you is also in the assignments area. Canvas has also got a rubrics tool, and what this does is it makes the marking process easier for lecturers, and it also helps students understand what types of feedback they've gotten and what areas they should look at improving in the future. The last collaboration tool that I'm going to share with you is the use of virtual conferencing in Canvas. So Canvas integrates with all the virtual conferencing tools. Here we've included a Zoom lecture. So if students click that button, it'll open up the window and they'll be able to join their Zoom meeting. And you can also integrate Teams or Skype, whichever video conferencing tool that you are using at your institution. So that's the delivery portion. And now we're going to talk about evaluating your curriculum. So from an evaluation perspective, as a lecturer, you're able to view all of your students' progress. So here we have one student in the course. We can see how they've moved through the content. We are also able to view, I know data has been a big discussion in today's seminar. There's a number of analytics tools in Canvas. You can view students by grades. You can view student engagement. When there's more students on the course, you can view students by their participations and page views, and you can also extract a number of reports. What's fantastic about this feature is that it also allows you to message students who, which helps with your student support agenda. So you can message students who have achieved a particular grade or who have not been participating as you would have expected. And then lastly, you're also able to add a survey onto your course in the wrap-up region or wherever you like, where students can evaluate your curriculum and also contribute their voice to where they'd like to see the curriculum going. I'm going to flip across to student view now, just so you can see what that looks like. So this is your student's homepage. You'll see there's a number of, there's fewer tools available. This menu is fully customizable. For a student's perspective, they can immediately see what's upcoming in their course and what they need to do. And one of the fantastic features of Canvas is that it has a badging tool. So when a student has completed the course with you, they are awarded a badge, and that badge they can share on any of their social media platforms just to spread the word about their achievement. And what Canvas also offers is a feature called Folio. And now Folio is like a LinkedIn platform where students can build a repository of all of the work that they've done, whether it be video submissions or file submissions. And it ends up being a portfolio of their work that they can use to submit to future employees and just to showcase what they're capable of when they're moving out into the world of work. Yeah, so that is a summary of what Canvas can do. I mean, there are a lot more features available, but for the purposes of this session, I've just provided you with a summarized view. I hope that you've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Kyra, for the presentation. And it demonstrates how technology can take off the load of administering, the delivery of a course. But maybe one more thing that needs to be emphasized is for student affairs practitioners, we are not going to have enough lecturers to give that much one-to-one attention as it was demonstrated. But we already have solutions and strategies. And the big one is peer support. So if you have your peers, those who went into the course earlier, they can come in and help you to drive the course. So instead of saying to university management, I need more and more practitioners to match the classroom lecturers, which will never happen. You have students, your senior students, or students who've already gone through the course, students that you can train, and they can then join you in driving curriculum. And with technology, it becomes easier. But you're also putting everything to record, and you then have evidence. I also like the badging feature, where students can carry with them evidence of the skills that they have learned, and they can use the evidence to profile themselves across various platforms. But also when they go into the world of work, they have more to produce in terms of those skills. We call them soft skills, and we call them, those graduate attributes. We use different terminology. And at times, my biology marks might not indicate that in the process, I also acquired conflict management skills, team skills, and all those other desirables. So badging is one of those processes where students can carry evidence electronically around their profiles and to indicate who actually provided the badge and which skills the student got through. And that's why we need to talk about assessment and evaluation following the kind of standards that are useful. So thank you so much, Cairo, for the presentation. And I can't emphasize it enough that this is about demonstrating that as we organize our curriculum outside the classroom, we must also make use of technology. And technology is advancing not for us just to be, observers, but also to use it and also find innovative ways of using it to make our lives easier. I'm aware that some universities at the stage in mental health, in student affairs, and their student counseling or mental health divisions are going after bots, robots, and they are making sure that they extend their hands to support students in building, for example, a resilience toolkits. If I just want to know, without even consulting an expert, how I can manage my anxiety and what are those symptoms that I need to be aware of and how to manage. You can talk to a robot, all of you. And through the services of a chatbot, you can end up accumulating a mental toolkits to help you through. So indeed, technology is here, and we must be able to exploit it to be able to do the kind of work that we want to do and deliver. I now want us to go into Q&A. Please mute your mic, Mr. Mohammed. Please mute your mic. I want us now to go into a Q&A session, and we will take 10 minutes on the Q&A. And once we are done, we are then going to discuss a poll, because we'd like you to help us and through a poll to indicate which are those big data moments that we need to create continentally and those policy lines that we need to pursue continentally for us to make sure that in what we do, especially in student affairs, prepares our graduates to be able to build the Africa that we want. How do we make sure that we make them ready? So we will be asking you to complete a poll, but before we do that, this is the moment for Q&A. We will watch the chat. You can type your question, comment in the chat, or you can just raise your hand, and then we will be able to give you an opportunity. And let's start off with what Prof. Mba has already raised. And he raised questions for Kwesi and for Bocha, and I would like you to respond. And Prof. Vish, I hope you're still in the meeting, and I think you also have a response to provide, given what you also shared with us earlier. So can we start with Dr. Michael, and then we have Mr. Sam following.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Madiba, and thank you, Professor Mba, for the question. So, Professor Mba requested we share some examples of some areas of engagement that we can help our students to get involved with. And also, he had a question, an issue about contextualizing these activities. So, some examples. community service is very African. Africa has a tradition of supporting communities. In fact, even farmers in many of our communities, they come together, go to one person's farm, get it done, move together to another person's farm. These things happen in Ghana and some African countries. So community service is traditionally an African thing. And we believe that student affairs professionals need to create a platform as simple as an office or a desk where students can go and sign up for various community service within the communities. As simple as identifying areas where students can go and serve. And if as a policy, universities, African universities can make it as part of their graduation requirement for students and graduate students to complete a number of community service hours as a condition for graduation, then at the policy level, we are making a headway. So my point is that community service is an example. It is African, it is part of our tradition and culture. We can also come out with leadership development opportunity for our students. Again, leadership development is African. Even within the chieftaincy institution, we have people who are potential chiefs, heir to the throne, spending time with chiefs and at the palace to learn how to do it. So leadership development, mentorship are all African concepts, African practices that we believe student affairs professionals can initiate for students to be involved in. There are many student-initiated opportunities in our various campuses. Let's enhance these student-led opportunities, student-led projects. University of Cape Coast, for instance, we have about 7 communities around the university. These communities, there are primary schools and junior high schools within these communities. One problem with some of the schools has to do with reading ability of some of the lower primary, upper primary students. Is it possible for us to remind our students to come together, spend time in some of these schools, 1 hour every week, and help these little kids to read? These are all opportunities that are around that. But student affairs professionals must facilitate for these things to happen. And then, as we said earlier, come out with learning outcomes, objectives for these activities so that you can evaluate them properly. So I think I've been able to address Professor Mba's issue with context, African context, and also some examples that we can all be involved with. International service learning is another piece related to community service, but with service learning, both the person offering the service and the beneficiary go through some fulfilling moments when reflections are done. So all these things are opportunities, and there are many of them around. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Mr. Kwesi Sam, over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Just to follow up where Dr. Botti ended. So one critical area that we also need to look at has to do with industry, university student partnerships and relationships. And that happens most of the time, making sure that student affairs practitioners are able to organize career-focused services for students. So throughout your 4-year stay on campus, when we have practitioners who are engaging industry players, organizing such fora, organizing such seminars or conferences for students on campus, it serves as an opportunity for them to gain certain skills, certain knowledge that they will need to work out there. Further to that, you could also create internship programs. In advanced universities, the Student Affairs Office does that, ensures that internship programs are well coordinated and students are able to have opportunity to work with industry players. In terms of entertainment, just as we said, students must have some leisure moments on campus, but how do we coordinate them? How do we ensure that beyond all that happens on the campus, it is responding to certain needs of the student? Let us not forget that every student has his or her own goal, but all that we are saying is that when we plan the educational institution in such a way that whatever the student does really respond to an indicator, then we will have students graduating from our institutions as fully fledged graduates who have skills to function socially, emotionally, psychologically, and what have you. There are guidance and counseling services which are very, very important. Students go through a lot of emotional and other psychological and even health issues on campus. But when these things are properly coordinated and well done, a critical example is a student who was having issues with a terminal ailment. And it had to take the counseling centers, it had to take the student affairs practitioners to really provide that adequate services for the student to go through his academic program successfully. In the absence of that, it may be difficult. We have issues of students committing suicide, students going through a lot of challenges that are in the purview or that are in the scope of what we do as student affairs practitioners. Just to the question of Professor Imba, and once again, Prof, thank you for that. We are not professing that once we have student affairs directorate fully functioning in our universities, we will cease to have problems. But you will understand that the university works in a cyclical way. So we all work together. If the academic affairs knows what it's supposed to do and working efficiently, the student affairs knows what it's supposed to do and is working efficiently, the security is working efficiently. When we all put our resources together, when we all know our mandate and what it takes to really affect the life of our students positively and ensure that at the end of the day, they graduate as with the qualities that we expect, then we will know that we are moving somewhere. We are focusing on student affairs because we feel there is a huge gap that we can fill in. There's a role, a critical role that we need to play as practitioners. And when we're able to play that role very well, we believe that may contribute to the overall and the optimum development of our students. So I think that we all have to put our hands on deck. We need to look at the whole setup of our universities. How do we ensure that everyone is working effectively and efficiently? And I believe that together we can achieve the Africa we want. Thank you.
Thank you, Provish. Your turn.
Yeah, just quickly, just to add, in terms of the WITS Food Sovereignty Initiative, which is a partnership also with Student Affairs, we are now at a point where we are sitting around the table with the landscape master planners, the green strategy experts at our university, and so on, and taking what was a pilot to a university scale intervention. So I just wanted to share that one point. The other point about this is that the Food Sovereignty Initiative has been a community partnership initiative. And in that regard, the university now is talking about scaling this up to be a volunteer program for all students across the university. There will be formal recognition built into the volunteer program so that even when you get your final, I don't know what you call it, your record from the university with your marks, you'll also be acknowledged as a volunteer in the program around food sovereignty. And finally, we are working again with academics and others to develop a climate justice education program, a culture program, all of that coming together in this trust. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the three panelists for responding to the concerns that Prof. Mba has raised and for providing very practical examples of how this is being done, not only as an ideal, something that can be done, but in terms of what is being done as we speak. And I just want to say, when students sign up for these community engagement projects, when students sign up to participate in the food sovereignty project at WITS, I would like to see them badged. I would like to see them walk out of the university with something beyond what they write in their CV, what they personally type. There must be a university endorsement, recognition, and acknowledgement that they have participated, because this is definitely a way of students saying, here we are prepared to develop, and we want to get out of universities ready. So they must be recognized. And that is why I find technologies such as badging extremely useful. I just also want to mention that, Prof. Mba, you'll remember that with the tuning project, which is a project to look at the comparability of degrees across the continent. When we started, we talked about generic attributes. And the question to the participants and experts in the room was, if you were to dream and put together a set of generic attributes that an African graduate is supposed to acquire, what would those be? And we had very interesting arguments, but one of them was, let's put in Ubuntu. An African graduate must graduate with this philosophy and a mindset almost, which should turn into a lifestyle of caring about the next human being, because you are, or I am because you are. And if we manage through our in-class and out-of-class curriculum, for example, to help our students understand how to value the humanity around themselves, their own humanity and the humanity of others. But that also extends to, doing what is right to earth, to the climate, if you value the humanity of others. And if we build that into our curriculum, and if student affairs practitioners, for example, take this African philosophy very seriously, Ubuntu, and fortunately, there is a lot of scholarship around it, we can use it to decolonize how we've been thinking about even our graduate attributes. I don't see any hand, and I'm actually happy about it, because at this stage, I want to move over and share with you a poll that we have organized. And what we want to ask of you after all these deliberations, would like you to choose 5 priorities that you think out of this meeting with CESA and with the higher education cluster, which responds to CESA, we should be able to concentrate on. We have 10 priorities, and we are saying these are some of the actions. You might also in the chat want to say, but on your list of 10, I see an omission and I see a gap. And if you put that, we will definitely build it into the report that will be writing. But what I want to ask you now in the next 2 to 5 minutes is and I will launch the poll very soon. I would like you to choose 5 priorities that you think we should concentrate on and mobilize through the envisaged policy unit to make sure that across the continent we get our hands dirty and do some work to really pull student affairs from where it is and elevate it to the place where it should be for the benefit of our graduates, but not just our graduates, as a way of making this significant contribution towards building the Africa that we want. So we are saying in the poll, would you consider a continental student satisfaction survey a priority? Should that be put in place? This is about data collection. Or should we add a continental student engagement survey? The two are different, and I hope through the deliberations you were able to get the difference. Or should we work on continental standards for provision of student support services? Continental standards on how student support services should be provided? Or should we work on continental professional standards of the student affairs practitioners? Which of these do you consider a priority? And you have to choose 5. Or should we talk about the continental student affairs curriculum outcomes and just, put it out there, of course, do some work and scope out continental outcomes and then say, these are the kind of things that we should be working towards? Or should we talk about a continental student leadership development program outcomes for the student leaders that go through our universities? Or should we talk about or focus on developing a continental evaluation instrument for student affairs provision at our institutions? Or should we work towards putting guidelines in place for the use of technology in student affairs? Or should we work towards a recognition system and incentives for institutions and student affairs divisions who make sure that their student development outcomes incorporate SDGs and Agenda 2063. And I hope through the presentations here, you were able to get an understanding of how that can be built in. And I just want to throw it again, the food sovereignty project at VETS is a good example of what we're talking about here. Or should we work towards working on a research agenda for student affairs at a continental level? So here are the 10 items, and we are asking which of these, at least 5 of them, do you consider as priorities that we can report back into the CESA higher education cluster and say, let's do work at a continental level to make sure that we have our priorities right. So I am going to launch the poll now, and I am asking all of you in the room to choose 5 priorities, and we are going to put this in our report. But if you have anything that you missed, like I said, please put it in the chat. We'll also take that into consideration in our final report. So can you please choose any of the 5? I hope you're able to see the poll. It has 10 items. Choose 5 priorities. Will you please do that? We do not have a lot of time. We have to end up the seminar at 1. And in the process, as you are busy choosing, I just want to thank you as participants for coming on board. I see that there's also a comment that we should even consider a certificate of attendance for this. This is a vote of confidence in the kind of value that you found, and we really appreciate that. To the presenters, the panelists, well done. We can't thank you enough for preparing and for sharing with us those insights. To Obriel, who organized this whole endeavor, from the start to finish, we really appreciate your work and the assistance that you have provided to us. And to Eiffel Corp and Cairo, thank you so much for coming on board with the demo.